are only as strong as their weakest link. If they're over-investing in an area, say flood resilience, but their energy grid is not very resilient, they haven't created the resilient community that they're really looking for.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, a regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Ryan Colker, Vice President of Innovation at the International Code Council. You can find the Fine Homebuilding podcast and the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Ryan, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really appreciate the opportunity.
Can you first please tell me what is the International Code Council and what you do for them?
Sure. So the International Code Council is really probably primarily known for the development of model building codes that are used across the country and around the world. But we also provide the services and solutions that really help communities and the building industry implement those codes effectively. So looking at various different products, training tools, those sorts of things. And so my role at the Code Council is Vice President of Innovation, which could mean a whole bunch of different things. But in my case, I direct our center of focus on energy resilience and innovation. So really looking at some of the cool things that are happening within the industry, really diving into where the Code Council should be involved and engaged, where there are opportunities for us to lead and drive progress to helping communities and the industry meet their goals, whether those sustainability, productivity, sort of all of those challenges that we see within the industry.
That sounds like a long list of stuff. So how do you do these things?
Yeah, so we have a great team at the Code Council, and so really looking across the organization for expertise, whether that's within our technical services team that works with our codes and standards every day, our training team that engages code officials and others within the industry. And then really engaging others, from across the industry. So there's a lot of exciting work happening, a lot of expertise from, all corners of the industry. So home builders, contractors, designers, financiers, all of those folks really sort of come together to create, the buildings that we, live in and enjoy. And so really being able to sort of draw the expertise from all of those folks to figure out sort of what are the best strategies and approaches to address, all of those issues.
So my understanding is a lot of your work is trying to make it possible for off-site building, which I think a lot of people acknowledge is one of the ways we hope to build more housing more affordably and recover quickly from disasters. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Code Council really recognized the opportunity that offsite construction provides to support certainly affordability, but I'm sure many of your listeners and others are really aware of the workforce challenges and finding folks to work in the construction industry. So offsite construction really presents an opportunity to address some of those challenges. We also see opportunities to advance safety and productivity within the construction sector as well. And so really looking at some of the opportunities that we have to drive progress while continuing to support the safety, efficiency, and resilience measures that the Code Council is really founded on.
I'm sure there are multiple goals, but is part of it to develop a model code for offsite building? Is that possible?
So not necessarily sort of a model code. Offsite construction really needs to comply with all of the requirements that are in the code wherever the structure is ultimately landed. Yeah. The challenge is that codes have been primarily written from the perspective of site-built construction. And so, sort of how you do the verification of compliance, on a site-built, home, the inspector would show up periodically and sort of see what's going on, really understand sort of what's happening, from each stage in the process. When you talk about offsite construction, that whole process happens in the factory. And so how do you assure that you're getting the same level of, safety and compliance when things are happening in the factory? And so what we're really working on is helping support sort of that assurance that quality, that safety is happening in the factory. And so developing standards to really help support the the both the fabricators themselves, but also code officials, sort of have that level of assurance. So, what is the process that sort of helps drive the achievement, of those goals? And so, really recognizing sort of that difference in the process. And so what we've done thus far is actually develop two new standards. So Standard 1200 really covers the design and fabrication process. So, what needs to happen in the factory, what needs to be on the plans and drawings, how do you assure that from a design and fabrication process, what's coming out of the factory, really meets the needs. Standard 1205, which is really in tandem with 1200, covers the inspection and regulatory side of the process. So, what are
In the factory or once it's on site, or both?
Both. I mean, the sort of the on-site process is not very different than sort of what we've seen in site built. It's just the sort of roles and responsibilities of the local code official is a little different. So, they're looking at the assembly on site, any of the foundation work on site. But then in the factory, there's sort of opportunities or needs for ongoing inspections, and whether that's done by a third party or a representative of the state or jurisdiction. Sort of what's the process for being able to do that. And then an additional step is the factory itself must have a quality assurance process in place. And so the third party or the state agency are really looking for compliance with that quality assurance process as well. And so those two standards really help support what comes out of the factory, meets the local code requirements, and then the local code official basically just needs to verify that that process was followed. And so, typically that will be through, a label on, each of the sort of offsite construction panels or modules.
It's a silly question, but I'm trying to gauge how comprehensive these standards are. Like the IRC codebook, as I understand it right now, is about 1,100 pages. How long are these standards, and what's in there?
Yeah, so the standards themselves are only about maybe 15, 20 pages. They, point back to the IRC, for instance, for all of the sort of design criteria and requirements. It's more around sort of the process of assuring and verifying that the IRC is followed in this case.
So for years, I've been hearing about how offsite construction, and I want to talk about other things, but this one has been stuck in my head, are about to go mainstream. We're going to see more and more of this, and I have yet to see that happen. But what systems do you think have the most potential to help solve some of the problems you alluded to earlier?
Yeah, I think certainly on the panelized side, really presenting some opportunities to bring some of the work around framing and those sorts of things back into a factory, which would really help address some of the workforce and labor challenges. Certainly an increase in volumetric modular construction, so three-dimensional boxes. I think that presents a real opportunity as well. So I think we'll definitely see some expansion in that space, particularly to address a lot of the challenges that we've just talked about around affordability, workforce. I think those are some of the sort of key drivers of maybe why we're seeing increased attention in this space.
Just the need. It's the market forces are saying we need more housing, right?
Absolutely.
What do you think about you mentioned earlier that part of your work is about resilience. Do these standards have those kind of things in mind?
Yeah, so a couple different ways that offsite construction and the standards themselves really support resilience. So, as we mentioned, all the requirements that are contained in the codes, apply to offsite construction. So, certainly thinking about snow loads or wind loads or addressing earthquake hazards, you'd get that same level of performance from offsite construction as you would on a site built structure. I think the exciting thing about offsite construction is sort of that speed to market opportunity. So community suffers a disaster event, loses a significant portion of its housing. There are certainly opportunities to leverage the speed of offsite construction to be able to get folks in housing quicker. And I think offsite really presents an opportunity for sort of a measured approach to recovery. So, thinking about sort of what are the essential needs in housing, kitchen, sanitation, bedrooms, living, maybe a little living space, is sort of the near term essential. But sort of as folks continue to recover, you may want to look at sort of other amenities. And so offsite construction potentially offers the opportunity to sort of continue to build out and add modules, sort of as the community continues to get up and running. So I think there's certainly some interesting models that can really help support the recovery in that space.
Can you please remind me of the resilience initiative that your ICC and you are a part of?
Yeah, so that's the Alliance for National and Community Resilience. We really recognize that the activities in the resilience space were really siloed. So you had different disciplines or different sort of systems focused on their own resilience aspects. But when we look at the community level, communities deliver a whole bunch of different services. There's a whole bunch of different things that make communities great. And if we don't look at the resilience of all of them, we have the potential of not being truly resilient. And so we're developing benchmarks to support a holistic vision of communities. So looking across the social, organizational, and infrastructural aspects, and really supporting communities in really getting that holistic vision of where are they today, where are their weak links, and where are maybe additional investments necessary.
The investments you talk about are an effort to fix things before they're a problem. Am I right? You're trying to mitigate the risk to a degree by spending a little money instead of having to rebuild an entire community. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have information like the National Institute of Building Sciences study that found that things like building codes save $11 for every $1 a community invests. Certainly, other strategies through federal grant programs, and so being able to leverage those benefits ahead of time and not wait for the disaster event to happen to really have to sort of ramp up response and really address the impacts that those particular events have on people, communities, and businesses.
So, what are some of the things that are trying to be done in that space to make communities more resilient? Is it about hardening infrastructure to withstand floods or winds, or what are you trying to do?
Yeah, sometimes. I think it's really a matter of sort of where the community is, what their particular needs are. So the benchmarks that we've developed thus far are on buildings, housing, and water. So the buildings benchmark really looks at opportunities through things like building codes, the adoption of codes, the enforcement of codes, but also resources for the contractor community, continuing education, those sorts of things.
To build better buildings, is that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so keeping up to date with the building code requirements. Also understanding sort of what are the particular hazards within a community, how to engage homeowners and really understanding, what their risks are and how, a good building design and construction can really help, sort of address those challenges. We also see opportunities for, community hardening, but, looking at both engineered and natural solutions. So we've seen some very sort of interesting opportunities in places like Iowa, where the flooding along the river can have significant impacts, and so being able to maybe create parks along the river that are designed to flood if the river overflows its banks, but then we don't lose, sort of housing or, significant impact on the community. And then, when the river's in good shape, the community can make use of those, amenities. So we've seen some pretty creative solutions, but, really being able to navigate sort of where is the best investment, for a community. And some of the challenges that we've really seen is, some communities maybe get fixated on, one particular solution and end up maybe over-investing in, one particular strategy to the detriment of something else. And so, as I mentioned, communities are only as strong as their weakest link. So if they're over-investing in an area and say flood resilience, but their energy grid is not very resilient, they haven't created the resilient community that they're really looking for.
So, how does one become a vice president at the ICC? I'm guessing there's not too many vice presidents of the ICC out there.
We have a few. We have various different departments and activities with some really great folks that are leading the charge to address a lot of these issues. My journey, I guess, is pretty interesting. I actually have an environmental policy and law background, and so really wanted to focus on policy related issues around just sustainability generally. I wasn't really sure sort of what aspect I would end up in after school, and really sort of fell into the buildings industry. I was at the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, or ASHRAE, for a while. And that was really the first opportunity to really understand the impacts of buildings.
So did you know what ASHRAE did when you applied for a job?
Maybe a little bit, but not, certainly not to the extent that you get when you sort of dive into those related issues.
Sure.
And so then moved over to the National Institute of Building Sciences, which really looks, across the building industry to, sort of understand what the needs and opportunities are. And so that was really an opportunity to sort of see the breadth of needs, and really looking at some of the key opportunities, through technology, through changes in practice, things like offsite construction, to really help drive things forward. And then, came over to the Code Council almost 4 years ago to really help, move things forward. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily sort of a direct path, but really, being able to sort of engage, with the industry, and really identify, sort of what are the needs to help move things forward.
What's it like living in Washington, D.C. or in the area?
Yeah, I really enjoy it. So I've been in the DC area about 20 some years now. As I mentioned, I really wanted to be involved in the policy space, and so where else are you going to go than DC? But always a dynamic place to be, always something going on. So really enjoy it.
Great museums.
Absolutely. But I think one of the things that probably most folks in any community, they don't make it to whatever the community amenity is until they get visitors. So haven't been to the museums too much lately.
You should go because they're totally amazing.
Oh, they are.
Yeah. So if you could wave your magic wand and achieve, say 3 important goals as Vice President of Innovation at the ICC, what would you say they are?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly the wider spread deployment of offsite construction, we certainly see a lot of the challenges that, industry and society are facing. And so I think that's a key way to sort of address a lot of those. The second one I'd mention is more uniform adoption of building codes. So we have, across the country, a sort of wide variety of different code adoptions, some places even without codes. FEMA recently did an analysis that found that about 30% of the country's construction activity is happening in communities without building codes. And so thinking about sort of what impact that has on people is huge. So
30%, is that what you said?
30%. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And really, you think about sort of the people that are living in those communities probably don't really sort of know, the sort of building code situation, they probably feel like, their local governments or the contractors they're working with, sort of have them covered. Um, I think the other, maybe important thing to note is, just because a locality doesn't have a building code on the books, you can still have, great contractors and builders in that community that are following, the latest best practices. You just don't
Right,
have
because
sort of
it's
that.
they see it as the right thing to do, right? It's yeah.
Right. Right. You just don't have sort of that verification mechanism. So it's a little harder to sort of assure every community member, has the same level of protection. So that would be my number two. Um, Number three, I think is really for, the building industry at large. I think there's real opportunities for collaboration, more collaboration, across the various different sort of silos of the industry to figure out, strategies to support, enhanced resilience and sustainability. And so, organizations like the National Institute of Building Sciences really help support that. The codes and standards development process at the Code Council. But I think really having those voices at the table, and assuring folks are, really working towards sort of that ideal state of our buildings and communities, I think would be really great as well.
You alluded to it earlier, it all comes down to local enforcement. If you're trying to have this policy making, at a state or federal level, how do you make sure that word is getting down to the town official who's inspecting my job site?
Yeah, so there are definitely a few different things. I mean, certainly education and training of code officials is really essential. Engaging policymakers of really understanding that codes provide value to the community, to the homeowner, and sort of making that case at the mayoral or city council level, who often don't really think about these sorts of policies, and then really maybe looking to some maybe non-traditional actors in this space. So financial institutions, insurance institutions, and seeing that the as homeowners sell their houses and buy new ones, that they have really an understanding of sort of what went into assuring that those houses are built safely and efficiently.
Do you see that non-traditional stakeholders like the insurance industry and banks are willing to listen to policy changes or entertain them?
Yeah, I think it's really picking up. I think folks are recognizing the increase in disaster events. What that means for their portfolios. There's a great analysis that's typically done after different hazard events, where they'll look at the sort of mortgage defaults associated with those disaster events. And so if people aren't coming back to the community, that impacts the tax base, but that also impacts sort of the books of financial institutions that put 30 years on the line to help people mortgage those properties. And if that property is no longer a value, or the homeowner is no longer able to pay that mortgage, that impacts
They're left holding
the
the
bottom
bag,
line.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I never thought about that. When you drive around your home or travel for work, I'm guessing you pay attention to the resilience and the construction that you see, like all of us. What do you think about when you see the stuff we're building right now?
It's definitely a mixed bag. I think there's definitely opportunities to do better. I think the thing that maybe annoys me the most is sometimes we build in dumb places, and the individual homeowner may not really recognize it, but I think we have responsibility as an industry to not build in dumb places.
Flood places that flood.
Yeah,
Where
places that
else?
flood, fault lines.
Yeah.
The sort of interesting one is the wildland urban interface. So For a few reasons. I mean, folks certainly like the outdoors and the access, to woodlands and those sorts of things, and completely understand, sort of that need or that desire. But there are smart ways to do that. So we have a wildland urban interface code that can, provide folks with some best practices to sort of be able to withstand those wildland events. But I think the other sort of interesting dynamic in the wildland urban interface is sometimes it's an affordability issue. So, if you drive, 2 hours outside of an urban area, you may have wildland area that's maybe more affordable for folks, and so you have sort of that dichotomy of affordability, and then maybe more affluent folks that build in the wildland urban interface, because of the sort of natural environment. And so I think that's an interesting one that we're seeing more and more attention on.
One thing I've observed, even in my lifetime, is that on the coast, the Gulf, and the Eastern Seaboard, housing on the beach used to be very simple and rustic. And when it blew away in a weather event, a few people would come with their pickup truck the following spring and rebuild it, and and little was lost. But the homes I see now on the coast are huge and expensive. Is that one of the dumb places you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I actually grew up in South Florida and have seen, sort of a lot of the changes. I think it'll be interesting to see, sort of that dynamic into the future. I think there are certainly smart ways to build in, many of these areas, but as we continue to see sea level rise, the increase in intensity of hurricane events, coastal erosion, sort of all of those things, I think that's certainly something to consider. As we continue to maybe build in many of these locations.
So, can you tell me about your own house? Is it on the shoreline of Maryland?
It is not. So, I'm in a Maryland suburb of DC, on the northwest side. Neighborhood is actually an infill. So, the sort of community around this farm, developed. The farm was, sort of no longer viable, and so there was this pocket of land, and so that's where my house is. About 5 minutes from the DC Metro, so very convenient for public transit. Really cool, I think, design to the neighborhood and to the house. So we've got a nice porch up front, a garage backing to an alley. So it really creates, sort of that maybe traditional, sort of old school neighborhood sort of feel. Yeah, so really enjoy it.
Is it similar to like where you grew up?
I guess in some aspects, like I mentioned, I grew up in South Florida, and that's got its own sort of type of architecture. But I think the sort of community and amenities, certainly similar. Yeah, I guess in some regards.
Are you planning to do any remodeling projects in the near future, or make any changes to your house?
I think probably the next step is solar. So we've been in the house about 10 years, so I guess we're not quite on the cusp of remodel yet, but maybe not too far in the distant future we'll do something. But yeah, I think solar's the next.
You got a good orientation for a solar panels array on your roof?
Yeah, it should be pretty good. And because it was a sort of previously cleared farm, we don't have big trees or anything like that. So yeah, should be a good opportunity.
Does Maryland have net metering?
I believe they do, and
Okay.
Really good tax incentives as well. And then we've seen some of the tax extenders in the recent Inflation Reduction Act should help with that as well.
It's gotten me thinking about it, I tell you. Yeah, and I'm thinking variable capacity heat pump too. So how is your place heated and cooled? You're in a very mixed climate. You have very humid, hot summers and reasonably cold winters, right?
Yeah. So first level, we have AC and gas furnace. Um, we have a on-demand water heater, gas. And then upstairs we have a heat pump.
Hmm.
So, as I mentioned, 10 years old, at that stage, it made sense to go with the natural gas. I think, as we maybe consider some of the remodeling opportunities, you know, probably take another look at, whether fully electric is the way to go. I know there's certainly lots of conversations in that space.
Oh yeah, I all I can see is there's a ton of work for a lot of people, and I think it's going to be pretty lucrative and exciting for the economy at large.
Yeah, and we're seeing lots of attention on heat pumps and heat pump water heaters and sort of other opportunities to help drive electrification at the same time that we're continuing to clean up our electric grid. So I think there's definitely a lot of exciting things happening in that space.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Ryan. Is there anything you'd like to ask or tell our audience before we part company?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity. I mean, if folks are interested in learning more about our offsite constructions activities, you can just go to iccsafe.org/offsite. So we've got resources there for folks to check out.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to Ryan Colker for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening, and helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Thank you.